There was just this one problem. There was just this one problem. I was looking at the text and it was interesting because when God speaks to Moses, he says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This statement would follow the children of Israel even to this present moment. They would forever refer to Jehovah as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. But this is the first time that God has called himself the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And I understand why God would be the God of Abraham, because Abraham was a friend of God. Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him as righteousness. I understand why God would be the God of Abraham, because Abraham looked for a city whose builder and maker was God. I understand why God would be the God of Abraham, because when Abraham's body was dead and could no longer produce a seed, God gave him a seed that was so potent that when it hit Sarah's dead womb, it brought it back to life again. And 42 generations later, that seed would come out the womb of Mary, and you would call him Jesus, but he would say, I am the seed of Abraham. You won't get that till you get home. I understand why he would be the God of Isaac, because Isaac was the promised child, the miracle child, the holy birth through a dead womb, the consequences of his father's faith. I understand why he would be the God of Isaac, because if it had not been for God, there would be no Isaac at all. Isaac was the result, the culmination of Abraham's faith, the epitome of faith. He was the evidence of things not seen. But what's got me hung up is that he is the God of Jacob. Jacob's name means trickster and con artist. Jacob was the black sheep of the family. He was a disgrace. He was a blotch on the face of a holy dynasty. That God would be the God of Jacob is shocking. It is the antithesis of religion. It is an embarrassment to the church. It is a disgrace to the kingdom that he would be the God of Jacob. Jacob was a mess. Jacob shouldn't sing in the choir or be on the deacon board. Jacob is a mess. Jacob should not be a pastor or a bishop or an elder. Jacob is a mess. Jacob has a messy past and some questionable situations. And Jacob didn't always tell the truth. And he was a con artist just like his racketeering mammy and her uncle Laban. Jacob was the result of a generational curse on his family. He had come from a long line of con artists. Why would God associate himself with the questionable character of Jacob? And why does he use this particular time to introduce this new name to himself and become the God of Jacob? Maybe it is because there is a little Jacob in all of us. Maybe it is because God is desperate to convince Moses, I can use you. Even though you murdered a man in Egypt and you've been living as an outlaw for 40 years, I am not just the God of the nicety nice, goody good, muckety muck people. I am not just the God of the sanctimonious, holy people who were virgins when they got married and lived righteous all of their life and never smoked and never drank and never chewed. I know it's about 10 of you in here that I'm describing, but the rest of you ought to be shouting me down right now. You ought to be knocking me down in the floor. You ought to be rolling around and talking in tongues. You ought to be laid out in the spirit, because if anybody looked at your background, there's no way in the world they'd understand why you'd be jumping and shouting in Lakewood on a Sunday morning. But God is a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Let every Jacob set me down in this place. Let every Jacob praise God. Every recipient of God's mercy and his unchanging grace. Don't you sit there with them and they with your cute self trying to fit in with people. It doesn't matter what they think. If God's grace fell on you, give him a praise right now. See, sit with me, I never will forget. I was 17 years old, Pastor Victoria, when I first got the understanding that God had called me to preach, and I thought it was a misdial. I spent 2 years doing every little dirty, nasty, filthy little thing I could do to convince God that he had made a mistake. I totally backslid and left the church completely because I couldn't believe that he would ask me to do something like that. I told him, I said, you're not getting no good deal. I mean, you are really shopping in the bargain basement this morning, God. You know, the closeout special, that's what you got. I walked around Shawnee Park with tears rolling down my face, and I asked God this question. I said, God, why don't you get one of the good people? Why in the world will you ask a guy like me? This is ridiculous. I said, Lord, I was walking around the park, Marcus, around and around and around and around, trying to convince God to get somebody else. I said, I'm honored that you would ask me to do that. I really can't believe that you would ask me to do something like that. But you've asked a crippled man to run a race. And how can I run the race when my legs are broken? I'm not good enough to carry your word. I'm not like those good church people. I've done some stuff. Anybody done some stuff? I've been through some things. I've had some situations in my life that's not going to look good on my resume. And I wish you would get one of those, because I went to church with some holy people. I know they were holy because they wore white. Yeah, they wore white and they said they was holy. And Kurt, they said they was holy. They said they didn't smoke or chew, and they didn't run around with them that do. And I had done all of that. And some other stuff that I ain't gonna tell you too. And I thought he made some kind of mistake. I knew he was the God of Abraham, and I knew he was the God of Isaac. But the question was, could he be the God of Jacob too? Why does God choose this time to introduce himself as being the God of Jacob? And why did God say the God of Jacob when God had told Jacob that his name was not Jacob? Don't you remember when Jacob was wrestling with the angel? And God said, your name is not Jacob, your name is Israel. Thy name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for thou art a prince with God. And the God who said his name was not Jacob, but Israel, called him Jacob. Hundreds of years later. See, Israel was the best part of Jacob, and Jacob was the worst part of Israel. And God, when he told him your name is not Jacob, but Israel, he was calling him to be the best part of himself. To renounce the Jacob, the trickster, the con, the supplanting part of himself. It seems like to me that God should have said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Especially when he said, don't call yourself Jacob anymore. Why does God call himself the God of Jacob? And why does he do it in front of Moses, who's backslidden? Why does God call himself the God of Jacob to activate a Moses who was a murderer? And why does God call himself the God of Jacob? You will find out because Moses said, I cannot speak for you, Lord. I don't mind going for you, but I can't speak for you? Why don't you get one of the good people? I'm not worthy. I cannot speak. I am slow of speech and I am not eloquent. And if you ask me to go to Egypt, I'll go and I'll throw down my rod and stuff. I don't mind doing it. And I'll stick my hand in my bosom. I don't mind doing that. You need me to pour out water, turn the blood. I don't mind doing that. But you can't ask me to speak because I can't. You know how I get when I get up. You see, Moses, everybody knows something about themselves that disqualifies them from being used of God. And for Moses, it was that he stuttered. Why would God ask me to speak to kings and I can't talk? Why, God, you want me to go speak in the palace and I can't speak? I'm a stutterer. I don't know who it is in this room, but God is asking you to do something that you think you cannot do. He's asking you to be something that you think you cannot be. He's asking you to reach something that you think you cannot reach because you know something about yourself that disqualifies you. It might have been an abortion that nobody knows that you had, but everybody has that stuttering situation that makes them think that they could never really be used of God because you stutter. Now I know why he said, I am the God of Abraham. And I am the God of Isaac. Yes, I am the God of them holy folks. But I am the God of Jacob too. I am the God of stammering lips. I am the God of stuttering people. I am the God of people who made mistakes. I am the God of people who've been to jail. I am the God of people who had babies out of wedlock. I am the God of people who've had an abortion. I am the God of people who've been through a divorce. I am the God of people who were not pure when they got married. I am the God of people who've been through bankruptcy. I am the God of people who didn't graduate from college. I am the God who's been around the block. I am the God of people who've been on drugs and been drinking and hooked on prescription drugs. I am not just the God of the high and the mighty and the righteous and the pure and the holy and the important and the prestigious. I am the God of the people that everybody rejected and denied and thought they would never be nothing. And if you will allow me, I will do marvelous things in your eyes. I called you, I equipped you, I sent you. The hand of the Lord is upon you. I don't know, I feel like I'm talking to somebody out there. God is going to use you. Stutter. And I'll lift your hands right now. Lift your hands right now all over this building. God is about to use you in areas of deficiencies and vulnerabilities and insecurities and intimidations. He is not just the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. He is the God of Jacob.